I never thought much about the apartment hallway until Mrs. Hargrove moved in across from me. Not Mrs. Like she still had a husband, just the way people my age automatically filed older women into that category. Mid-40s, I guessed. Sharp eyes, hair tied back like she didn't care what it looked like, but somehow it made her look like she was in control of everything. I saw her first at the corner coffee shop, not in the hallway. It was early, too early for the part-timers and students. I was sitting with my headphones on, pretending to read, when she stepped up to the counter. She didn't look around, just ordered her drink like she'd done it every day of her life. And then, without turning her head, she said to the barista, "He's going to ask for an extra shot, aren't you?" I blinked. Pulled one headphone down. "How do you? You always hesitate at the register." Extra shot hesitation. She didn't smile, but there was a spark in her voice, like she was amused that I'd been caught in something so small. After that, I noticed her everywhere, not in a fate kind of way, more like in the way you notice a light flickering in a room you've sat in for years. She'd wave if we passed in the hallway, but it was never more than that. Until the day I accidentally left my scarf in the laundry room. I came home to find it folded, perfectly, on top of my mailbox. The kind of folding you don't bother with unless you were taught to do it right. No note, but I knew it was her. Later, when I saw her outside with her coffee, I said, "Thanks for the scarf." She shrugged. "It looked cold without you." And then she laughed, quick and quiet, like it had surprised her. We didn't talk long, just about the rain that was coming, how the dryers downstairs never got hot enough. But something about the way she looked at me, not scanning, not judging, made me feel seen. I didn't know how much I missed that until it happened. That night I sat at my desk with my phone in hand. I typed a message, "Want to grab coffee tomorrow?" But I didn't send it. Instead, I watched the cursor blink until the screen dimmed. The next morning, I went to the coffee shop earlier than usual. She was already there, sitting at the window. I ordered my drink, no hesitation this time, and when I turned, she was looking right at me. Not smiling, but holding my gaze like we were in the middle of a conversation we hadn't started yet. When I walked past her table, she said, "We should talk about your laundry skills sometime." I almost stopped, almost sat down. Instead, I just said, "Maybe we should." I made it halfway down the block before I realized I was smiling. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Pick one of us," the message read. I stopped walking. The street was loud, buses, crosswalk beeps, but somehow it all felt muted. Another message came in before I could think. Or why not all of us? I turned back toward the coffee shop window. She was still there, head tilted, phone in her hand. I didn't answer the text right away. Partly because I wasn't sure it was meant the way it sounded, partly because I wanted to see if she'd say more. She didn't. That night, I passed her door on the way back from the vending machine. Light leaked under the frame, and I thought I heard music, something low and crackling, maybe an old record. I slowed down, then kept walking. The next morning, my scarf was back around my neck, and I told myself that meant nothing. A week later, I found her in the laundry room. She was leaning against the dryer, flipping through a paperback with the cover folded back. No makeup, hair loose. She looked softer somehow. "Didn't think you came down here yourself," I said, loading my clothes. She looked up. "You think I've got some kind of laundry service? You seem like the type who knows people." A small smile. "Maybe I used to." She closed the book and set it on top of the dryer. "When I was your age, I thought having the right people around would keep me from feeling stuck." I didn't know what to say to that. She turned to switch her load, and I noticed her wedding ring finger, bare, but with a pale band where a ring had been for years. "Did it work?" I asked. She didn't look at me. For a while. We ended up sitting on the folding table, sipping the tea she'd brought in a thermos. The dryers hummed. The smell of warm cotton hung between us. She told me about a winter in her 20s, the kind where the city felt too big and too cold at once. How she'd learned to knit just to keep her hands busy. I wanted to ask her what had happened since then, but something in the way she wrapped her fingers around the thermos made me hold back. Instead, I told her about my first apartment, the way the radiator clicked all night, how I used to eat cereal for dinner. She laughed, but her eyes softened like she was picturing it. There was a part of me, the quiet, half-hidden part, that wanted to imagine us in the same room like that. Not laundry tables and vending machine tea, but the way her voice might sound reading something out loud, or how she might look in the morning light. I shook the thought away. Age was only part of it. She carried a history I didn't know, and I wasn't sure she'd want me to. When her dryer buzzed, she stood and brushed imaginary lint from her jeans. I handed her the book she'd set down earlier, and for a second her fingers touched mine. Not an accident, not quite deliberate either. She held my gaze, then slipped the book under her arm. "Next time," she said, "you're bringing the tea." I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next time we ended up alone, it wasn't planned. I was coming back from the store, hands full of paper bags, when I heard her call my name from the open doorway. "You look like you're about to drop those," she said. I stepped inside before thinking about it. Her apartment was almost a mirror of mine, same walls, same layout, but warmer. Books stacked on the floor. A plant leaning toward the light. The smell of something faintly sweet in the air. She took one bag from me, set it on the counter. "You buy the same bread every time," she said, glancing at the label. I shrugged. "I like what I like." Her eyes flicked up. "Do you?" We talked while she put the groceries away, and I noticed how she moved, not in a hurry, not distracted. Present. It made me self-conscious, like she could see the way I kept shifting my weight from one foot to the other. At one point I reached for the tea kettle on the stove without asking. She let me. We sat at her small kitchen table, steam curling between us. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "I've been busy." "With what?" I didn't answer. I watched her instead, the way she tapped the rim of her mug with one finger, how her hair had slipped loose around her face. She looked away first. "People might notice, you know. If we keep..." She didn't finish the sentence. Later, we were both leaning against the counter, shoulder to shoulder. The radio was on low, some old love song either of us commented on. She was close enough that I could smell her perfume under the tea and bread. I almost said something then. Almost told her about the way my week felt wrong when I didn't see her. But footsteps in the hallway stopped me. Voices. 2 neighbors talking loudly about the mail. She stepped back, just an inch, but it felt like more. "Maybe we should," she started, then shook her head. "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to. I left a little later than I should have. At the door, she reached past me to flip the lock, her arm brushing mine. We both froze for half a second. If she'd looked at me then, maybe something would have happened. Maybe I would have leaned in, or maybe I would have pulled away first. But she kept her eyes on the lock, turned it with a soft click. "Good night," she said. "Night," I answered, though the words stayed stuck in my throat. It was raining in that way where you couldn't tell if it would stop in 10 minutes or go all night. I found her sitting on the bench under the awning by the side entrance, a paper cup in her hands. "You're out early," I said. She glanced up. "Couldn't sleep." I sat beside her. The bench was damp, and our knees were almost touching. Neither of us moved. We watched the rain hit the parking lot, pooling in small silver ripples. I thought about saying something light, but her shoulders were tense, her eyes fixed on the downpour. "You've been with someone," she said suddenly. I blinked. "What?" Her jaw tightened. "You smell like perfume." "Not mine." There was no accusation in her voice, but it landed heavy. "It's not like that," I said, though I wasn't sure what that was to her. She gave a small laugh, not amused, more like she was laughing at herself. "I don't know why I even noticed. I shouldn't care." We sat there, listening to the rain get harder. I wanted to tell her that I hadn't been with anyone, that she was the one in my head more than I wanted to admit. Instead, I said, "You do care." Her eyes flicked to mine, quick and sharp. Then she looked away again. "When I was younger, I thought, if you just keep the door locked, nothing can get in. But then someone's standing outside and you can hear them breathing, and you don't know if you want to let them in or tell them to go away." I swallowed. "And where am I standing right now?" She smiled, small, almost sad. "That's the problem." We didn't talk for a while after that. A car passed on the street, tires hissing in the wet. Somewhere upstairs, someone dropped something heavy. Finally, she said, "You make me forget how much older I am." I turned toward her. "And is that good or bad?" She didn't answer right away. Her hand was resting on the bench between us, palm down. I could feel the warmth radiating off her skin. My fingers twitched, wanting to close the distance, but I stayed still. Her gaze met mine, steady now, rain reflected in her eyes. "If I told you what I wanted right now," she said softly, "I'm not sure I'd like your answer." The rain slowed. A drop slid from the awning above, landing between our shoes. I leaned forward, just slightly. "You could ask." Her lips parted like she might, but then she turned her head, looking back out at the lot. "Could I?" Here's prompt 5, quiet, ambiguous, and pulling them apart just when it feels like they might step forward. The next morning, I didn't see her. Not in the hallway, not at the coffee shop, not even through her window across the courtyard. By the third day, I started timing my errands to catch her: mail runs, laundry loads, slow walks past her door. Nothing. On the fourth night, I finally saw her light on. I almost knocked. My hand was even halfway there before I heard voices. One male, low and familiar enough to make my stomach tighten. I stepped back, told myself it was none of my business. The next time we crossed paths was a week later. She was coming in from the parking lot, coat pulled tight, hair damp from rain. She smiled, polite, distant. Like we'd never sat on that bench in the downpour. "How've you been?" I asked. "Busy," she said, eyes on her keys. "My daughter's been staying with me." I blinked. She'd never mentioned a daughter. "She's 21. She added, almost like she'd been expecting my silence. "Visiting before she leaves for a job overseas." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. After that, she stopped showing up at the coffee shop entirely. I told myself to leave it alone. Whatever was happening, it wasn't mine to fix. But then, one night, I found her sitting alone in the laundry room, book in hand, half-finished tea beside her. She looked up. "You're out late." "So are you," I said, trying to keep my voice even. She closed the book. "Sometimes it's easier to be down here than upstairs." I wanted to ask what she meant, but her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled faintly, and put it face down on the table. We didn't talk much after that. I kept waiting for the old rhythm, the small glances, the easy tea sharing, but she seemed careful now. Conversations clipped at the edges. No more touches that could be passed off as accidents. One night I sat at my desk, phone in my hand. I typed, "I miss seeing you." Then deleted it. Typed again, "Are we okay?" Deleted that too. I stared at the blank screen until my reflection stared back at me in the glass. I saw her a few days later through the coffee shop window. She was laughing, really laughing, with someone I didn't know. I almost went inside. Almost slid into the seat across from her, like I belonged there. Instead, I kept walking. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. If you want, I can take part 6 into the space where they're forced back into contact, not by choice, but by circumstance, and the unresolved tension has to surface. It happened on a Tuesday night. I was taking the trash out when I saw her struggling with a box at her door. Bigger than it looked, awkward to carry. "Need help?" I asked. She hesitated, like she might say no, then stepped back. "If you want." Inside, her apartment was half rearranged, books stacked in new piles, a chair angled differently. The box went against the wall. I stood there, waiting for her to say something else. "You've been busy," I said finally. She didn't look at me. "My daughter left yesterday. The place feels different. Quieter? Too quiet." We ended up in her kitchen without meaning to, mugs between us, the kettle still warm. She leaned against the counter. I leaned against the opposite one. The air felt heavier than it should. "You stopped coming to the coffee shop," I said. "You stopped knocking," she replied. I looked at her. She looked right back. "I didn't know if you wanted me to," I said. "I didn't know if I wanted you to," she said softer. Then, "I don't know what we're doing." I almost laughed, because I'd been thinking the same thing for weeks. "Me either." We both went quiet. The only sound was the hum of her fridge. She picked at the edge of her mug, not looking up. "I don't want to be something you look back on like a bad idea," she said. "You're not," I told her. It came out fast, sharper than I meant. "You're not." Her shoulders eased just a little. "Then what am I?" I stepped forward, one slow movement at a time, until I was close enough to see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. "You're the person I keep looking for," I said. "Even when I tell myself not to." She held my gaze for what felt like a long time. Then she reached up, not to pull me in, but to touch my face lightly, like she was making sure I was real. "You know this could get complicated," she said. "It already is." For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Small. Honest. We didn't kiss. We didn't make promises. We just stood there, her hand on my cheek, my fingers brushing her wrist. "Okay," she whispered. I don't know if she meant okay, we'll try, or okay, we'll leave it here. But for the first time, it didn't matter. It didn't happen all at once. There was no sudden change, no line we crossed and couldn't step back from. Just smaller distances, slowly closed. I started knocking again. Sometimes she answered, sometimes she didn't, but she always smiled when she saw me. We went back to the coffee shop, not every morning, not like before, but enough. On days she didn't come, I'd leave a tea on her doorstep, the lid marked with a small H for hers. She never said she noticed, but once I saw the empty cup sitting neatly on her counter. One Saturday, I found her on the bench by the side entrance. It wasn't raining this time, just overcast. She handed me half her sandwich without asking if I wanted it. "Better than bread," she said. I laughed. "You remember that?" "I remember more than you think," she replied, sipping from her thermos. We didn't talk much about what we were. But over time, it stopped feeling like something fragile I might break by naming. She'd text me at 8:47 a.m. with a single word, "Coffee?" and I'd be out the door. I started bringing better tea to the laundry room. She started trusting me with the folding. Her daughter came back once for a weekend. I met her in passing. No one explained anything, and it felt better that way. It was one of those cool spring mornings when I realized I didn't feel paused anymore. She was in the kitchen, hair loose, fussing over whether she'd brewed the tea too long. I was leaning in the doorway, watching her tilt her head at the kettle like she could hear the water thinking. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "Yeah," I said. And that was it. No confession, no speech. Just her handing me my mug and us sitting at the table like we'd always been there. Later, when we walked to the bench, she slipped her hand into mine. Not tightly. Just enough that I knew. We sat there, watching the street. I thought about that first rainy day, the way we'd almost said things we weren't ready to say. "Still complicated?" I asked quietly. She smiled, eyes on the passing cars. "Probably. But it's ours." I didn't need more than that. Some things don't end. They just change shape until they fit in your hands. 3.